One is June 17th, kind of on my midday walk. This is becoming a bit of a routine here in the COVID times, and want to make some comments about digital identity. I've been virtually attending the Identity North conference, unconference more correctly. Unconference meaning we can break off into groups and have separate conversations and kind of drive the agenda as both attendees and then more specifically participants, which I think is a great conference format, especially when it's done live, but it's actually working reasonably effectively virtually. And just going to comment overall on kind of digital identity as a theme that I've been particularly interested in my career, especially for pretty much the last 10 years. And I think there's a bunch of areas around the sovereign individual, which is a big bucketed term that has lots of different meanings and lots of different stakeholders, but I think is reasonably self-explanatory. Of us as users, as citizens, as humans, should be the ultimately in control of our identities. And you can interpret that a lot of ways, which is part of the challenge of what does the sovereign individual mean. That I, as Scott Howard, should be able to define who I am and present who I am and engender trust to the different credentials that accumulate up to the representation of Scott Howard in a bunch of different contexts. And I'll leave a lot of the identity stuff behind. It's well covered, because I think my angle on it and where I've spent most of my professional time thinking about digital identity is what I'm actually thinking about and working on is data integration, data management. And I'll look at even more specifically in this conversation from a data integration perspective. Data management will cover a lot of the privacy concerns, the governance concerns kind of happen in data management. Once we've tackled governance and management, typically the business application of those digital identities, those identifying attributes inside of databases, is to integrate them to create a more holistic picture of the object. And I'll just use myself as a consumer for the example of who is Scott Howard to us as an organization or as a group, and how is it we're trying to interact with him, and then what data do we have that can map the where, the how, the why, and what types of interactions can drive the engagement that our entity wants with the Scott Howard entity. And I think that becomes very, very challenging from a technology perspective, just integration period. It's hard to pull off and hard to do, mostly from a time and energy perspective, not from a technical perspective. And I get excited about all the different tech that reduces the time, and APIs have been the API and cloud have been the driver of that in the last 10 years, and kind of hyper acceleration in the last 5 years, and kind of summarized by microservices. You can do a lot of orchestration of that data to get to ask questions of it and get answers of it much more effectively because of microservice architectures. And once you get there, it's asking the right questions. And then once you get the answer to the question, how do I trigger an action against the response? And as the governance and the management of that in the specific context of digital identity, so personal identifying information, let's use GDPR as the regulatory bucket to capture that in terms of the ultimate concern of compliance, that has to catch up with kind of my microservice architecture that has these event-driven flows in them. And that's a huge business opportunity. The companies that are able to vector the legislatively driven compliance of the GDPR and what's coming out of California and PIPEDA in Canada with the hyper efficient and effective microservice type technologies that are triggering off of events, and the new, it's been here a long time, but new in terms of hitting the crest and the wave of consumer demand. Of not only do I don't care about GDPR, I care that you're exploiting me as a user, and I'm going to demand a different set of services and way of servicing me. In the context of Facebook, you were exploiting me, and I don't think I'm getting a fair deal. It's going to change my relationship as a consumer to Facebook or Google or Walmart or Tim Hortons. Because Tim Hortons, you don't need to know that about me. And not only do you not need to know that about me, you sure as heck don't need to share that about me in order to serve me coffee. And Tim Hortons is a relatively emergent hot topic, front burner topic, particularly here in Canada, but I think in this overall world of marketing tech, digital identity technology, event-driven transaction orchestration, things like that, they screwed it up big time. And almost every company in the space is screwing it up to some degree. There's very few architectures that have it right. This is a huge piece of cryptocurrencies movement, and the overall kind of blockchain decentralized movement is exactly in this. So we should be very clear and opted in with agency on the transaction we're entering into. And that is not, clicking the EULA that's 15 pages long is not it. That is corporate cover your ass BS, of which Apple's got more lawyers than any human could ever throw at it. So what did I click? Either you want to use the iPhone or you don't. When I bought it, I opted in. Don't make me click something. I ain't going to read it. My lawyer's not going to read it. And if I violate it or you violate it, you get to prosecute me. I don't get to prosecute you because I don't have 10,000 lawyers. So that is not the commercial. It might legally work, but it's commercially it's falling apart. And so how do we start providing true agency, true balanced counterparty interaction between a consumer and a megacorp that kind of gets the spirit of that EULA to actually be effective? And crypto is in the right direction of that. Crypto's challenges are obviously in the user interface problems and the overall functionality and maturity of the overall stack. But technology moves on an exponential curve. That'll get there sooner rather than later. And mainstream technology is moving in that direction because the overall theme of decentralization, user empowerment, and a truly balanced playing field, a playing field that's balanced by the rules of the technology that can be inspected by anyone willing to take on the effort to do it, is a much fairer world than whoever has the most lawyers and the ability to use the legal system via the ability to spend money on lawyers. Fairness. So you can get much more, like an individual can fight Apple on software terms, they can't fight them on legal terms. And that and Apple's actually pretty good at this, so I'm not picking on Apple, I'm just using it as a huge corp. So this movement's super important. And it's technology driven, but we got to figure out what kind of business cases am I trying to effectuate? What kind of user relationship, consumer, both as an enterprise buyer and a consumer user relationship you can create by using these technologies better? And I think that's a really interesting question that I'm specifically pursuing with Proof Zero right now, but a number of other projects and past projects all vector around this. and it's definitely an area of deep interest. So love to hear what you have to say about it.